All right, now that we've learned how to blend, we're going to start to put in some of these textures and blending into our painting on top of the block-in. I did create some charts to help you with inserting your warm and cool colors, since I provide lots of different paint colors for you. So how this chart works is looking at your red. If I have a red object, let's say I'm painting an apple, and the highlight of the apple is usually going to be warmer, so you want to use your warmer red. So cadmium orange hue or cadmium red medium are warmer reds than the primary. If you're trying to go cooler, like you're painting the shadow of the apple and you're trying to cool the red, you want to use your alizarin red, crimson, or any of these magenta or deep violets in order to cool the apple. Same thing with your blue, warmer blues, cooler blues. Yellows, warmer yellows, cooler yellows. So I've provided your primaries and your secondaries if you're working with objects that are green, purple, or orange, as well as neutrals, because I know some of you guys are working on painting bones or something that's made out of wood that will take on these neutrals. Okay, so use this tool to help you when you're warming and cooling a color. Now, you could certainly just use plain warm and cool colors off your color wheel, right? Anything that's reds and yellows will be your warm color. You can think about fire as hot. Anything related to a fire will be warmer. Or you could be using your blues and greens and violets. Those are cooler colors. You can think about ice. Those will also work for your objects. Okay, so our goal here when we're warming and cooling our objects is you want to warm the highlight and you want to cool the shadow. Another thing you want to think about is anything closer to you is going to be warmer, anything further away is going to be cooler. So this radish is going to be my warmest object because it's the first thing I would touch if I could reach out and touch my still life. The cup would be the second warmest, and then things in the background are going to be a lot cooler. They're further away. So you want to think about the depth in the picture, your foreground, your middle ground, and your background. Okay, you're gradually getting colder as you move back into your painting. You could also think about one object at a time. You know, your radish here, if I reached out and touched my radish, this center part would be the first thing that would come in contact with my hand. That would be warmer here in the middle. The edges of the radish are further away than the center of the radish, if this was popping out of my picture. So the edges of the radish are going to be a little cooler. Okay, so you want to be thinking about what's close, what's far as you start to blend. So what this looks like, if I start here on my radish, it's the closest thing to me. I know the center of my radish is the first thing I'm going to touch. So I'm going to take my shadow color and I'm going to warm this. Now it's kind of a reddish purple, so I could use my chart and I could look at my reds and say, oh, I need to use some of my cadmium orange hue, or maybe I want to say it's purple and maybe I want to use some of the magenta to warm the purple. Either solution would be just fine. You're going to find those colors in the back of the classroom. You're going to mix them up to warm it. Okay, so I'm going to try to warm the color here in the very center of my radish. And then I'm going to try to cool it as I get closer to the edges. I don't want to lose this dark shape for the shadow as I'm applying warm and cool. So I'm putting a little bit of my magenta here on the edge. It's a little bit more purpley, less orangey. And then as I roll around to the back side, it's getting further away. I might even plop in a little bit of blue or my deep purple to really push that edge back. It's far away and it's in shadow. I want to cool it. Okay, so you can see it's a little warmer in the middle and a little cooler on the edges. I'm going to do the same thing on the light section that I blocked in. So I'm working with yellow, so you could use your chart if that helps you. You know, I'm starting with my primary yellow, so to warm it I could use cadmium yellow medium, to cool it cadmium yellow light. So the cadmium yellow medium is a little bit more mustardy color. So I could start to warm that just a bit. And I could blend this a little bit into my red shadow since it's wet. And then I'm going to start to cool the edges using my cadmium yellow light, which tends to be a little bit more limey. And you don't have to have a perfect blend. You could do a smooth blend here. You could do a stippling blend, a hatching blend, a blocking blend. You know, I could pull some of this yellow, flick it down into the red, just to help that transition. Give it a little bit of color. Okay, I want to put a little bit of a flicker of blue back here to really push that back and make it look cool. Oh yes. All right, then I'm going to do the same thing for each object. So if I work up here on my teacup, the teacup is going to have a warmer highlight. So I want to add a little bit of yellow to my highlight to warm it. Now my teacup is porcelain, so if I look at my image, it's pretty smooth. So maybe I want to try to do a little smoother transition as I blend across my teacup. It's also a white object. The tricky thing is with painting white objects, gray objects, or black objects, if you want them to look white, black, or gray, you're actually going to have to use multiple colors in your highlights and your shadows in order to make them look white, black, or gray. If you shade it with just blue, it's going to look blue. If you shade it with just green, it's going to look green. Okay, so I'm dragging some of my yellowish highlight. I might even put a pop of little orange into that highlight to help warm it in certain sections. Okay, not very much. I still want this to be my highlight. I don't want to get too dark. And then working into the shadow, I'm going to try to insert more than just blue. Pop a little bit of purple in there. Try to grab a little bit of green. Again, I'm trying not to lose the shadow, right? I don't want to go too light here. A little bit more blue to darken that left side. Maybe a little bit more green. Careful not to undo your adjustment layer, so I don't want to lose my edge down here that I adjusted earlier. Maybe I'll lighten that whole section. It is pretty easy to blend if you're working on one object at a time because the paint will stay wet. And it's okay to have some brush strokes. You know, things don't have to be perfectly smooth. That's part of the beauty of painting, is seeing some of those brush strokes. Okay, so you can see just in this front wall, all the different colors. There's some yellows and oranges and greens and blues. They're warmer on the highlight, they're cooler on the shadow. And I'm going to repeat that on every section I blocked in. So I'm going to start back here on the back of the cup. There's my light section, there's my dark section. Warm it, cool it. Same thing on my shuck, warm it, cool it. All the way through, warm it, cool it, warm it, cool it, all the way until everything is covered. So this step will take a little bit longer. In fact, I would say maybe spend 2 to 3 days putting in your warms and cools and blending at the same time. Okay, so depending on the objects you're using, you can use different kinds of blending. I know for my corn shuck here, it's very stripy, so I might use a bunch of hatching for my corn shuck. That might be a good solution. You know, my radish wasn't very linear, so maybe I could do more of a smooth blend or even just a bunch of dots if I wanted to. Same thing with the leaf. The leaf is kind of speckly. Maybe I want to dot those leaves when I start to blend in my warms and cools. So you can make that decision as you're observing your objects, what kind of blending would work best for that object.